Today's webinar. My name is Melissa Schwartz, and I'm the manager of the Education Department here at TrainingPeaks. And joining me, I also have Sean Hygen. Sean is a member of the education team. So this webinar is titled Off-Season Nutrition, Taming the Wild Beast. And the coach presenting it is Kim Schwabenbauer. But before I turn it over to Kim, I'm just going to go through a couple housekeeping items. So number one, we are going to be we're going to be collecting questions for Kim at the end. So she's going to save some time for Q&A. If you have a question that you'd like Kim to answer, go ahead and enter it in the question area. So in the GoToWebinar control panel, you have a little box where you can enter questions. Please don't wait until the very end. Go ahead and ask the questions as Kim is going through her presentation, and then Sean and I will be answering questions regarding TrainingPeaks, and we'll be saving questions for Kim that are based on her presentation. So again, don't hesitate, don't wait until the end when she's actually doing Q&A. Go ahead and ask the questions during the presentation. If you have specific questions on your TrainingPeaks account or features about nutrition aspect of TrainingPeaks, please send in a support ticket, and we'll be able to help you that way. So just go to support.trainingpeaks.com, and from there you can send in your question into support. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Kim. So Kim, I'm giving you presenter rights. Just hold on one second. Let me find you in this huge list. Okay, Kim, so you should have the ability now to share your screen.
Great, thank you. And hopefully you can see the presentation.
Yep.
So here's great. All right, thank you so much, Melissa. I appreciate that. And thank you to TrainingPeaks for setting up this wonderful opportunity for me to speak with all of you today. I could not be more excited to share this topic with you. It's something that I know is on many people's minds as most of us are taking a downtime right now with training. Maybe you did end the season a tad bit earlier and you've already gone through most of your off season. Some people like to wait until the new year to actually get things started again. So it's a perfect time to really address this particular issue of off-season nutrition. And it's entitled Taming the Wild Beast because many of us do tend to go a little bit overboard during this season with the holidays, etc. So this is the perfect time to address what should be happening during the off season and to talk about the holidays as well. As Melissa said, I am a registered dietitian, a USAT Level 1 coach, and a professional triathlete as well. Just to tell you a little bit about me so that you know a little bit about my credentials, I did major in nutrition at Penn State. I did actually compete as a cross-country member there while I was there, and I actually went on to be a team captain for my ending portion of my senior year. Started doing triathlons, decided that I loved them. I was absolutely crazy about the sport, and I went on in 2008 to do my first Ironman ever at the World Championships, obtained 2 amateur titles, and then this year became a professional. So that's really what I'm doing now and focusing on now, along with my business, which is sports nutrition counseling and endurance coaching. And I coach a number of athletes, anything from 5Ks to Ironman distance triathlons, and I've been a registered dietitian for over 10 years. And this is just a quick picture. A little fun fact about me is that I actually coached a young man who was on that show MTV Made, and he did his first triathlon. It would have been last summer in July, and so you can actually watch that anytime from my website. It's kind of a fun show, and he did a really great job. So we worked on nutrition and all those things. So I invite you to visit my website anytime. Here's a little bit about my life. It's crazy. It's busy. I'm living the same life that many of you are. It's not always easy to be, worrying about nutrition, thinking about nutrition, but it really, truly has to be a part of our training, and it really is the fourth discipline of triathlon. Without it, we truly are not getting our maximum potential out of our workouts and sometimes out of our races. So keep those things in mind as we move forward. I've been there. I've done that. I'm with you. This may look like your off season. It may be look like just a, crazy time with a lot going on. And if this is the way you're using your particular treadmill, which many people do during the off season to pile things up, this can be a good thing for a little bit. And we want you to have an off season, but we really need to think about what's happening, and especially the length and duration and all those different things. So this is one way to look at off season. And I truly believe as a dietitian, we are what we eat. What we put in is what we're going to get out. So it's very important to really examine those choices, and especially as athletes, we're expecting more and more from our bodies. It's so important to think about what kind of nutrient fuel is going in. So that's a good example of we are what we eat. So going into off-season phases for training specifically, I want to go over this because you may be in either phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3, and they're a little bit different. The first phase would be total rejuvenation. So you've done your last A race of the year. You don't have any more structured training going on. This is when you sleep in. This is when, you see your friends. You really don't have anything on your plate in terms of athletics and training. And it's just a perfect time to take a mental break from the sport. The actual duration of this type of period really depends. For certain athletes who've been putting in an extreme season, maybe you've done 2 Ironmans this season, your total training was up around the 700 to 1,000 hours, you're really going to need a pretty solid break for your phase 1. And each phase can last between 2 and 4 weeks. So for me in particular, I'm taking 2 weeks completely off. Nothing, no working out, period. And if you really didn't have that long of a season, or you really didn't go to your full extent, maybe you don't need quite as long in phase 1. So use that as kind of your guide. From there, you will move into phase 2, which is aerobic reintroduction. So this might look something like you doing some mountain biking. Maybe you're doing some cross-country skiing, or something that's just not normal for you, but still is aerobic in nature. And it's low intensity. Only 30 minutes to 2 hours is a pretty normal length. And you really want to be cautious when you're doing this type of training. You don't want to get involved with group rides, or something that's really going to totally push you beyond your limit. Maybe someone else is in a different phase and already gearing up for next year. So this would be a great time to stay in tune with your own personal needs, not push anything, not go beyond really what you want to do. So that would be aerobic reintroduction. So just a little bit here and there, still taking some days off if you need it. Finally, we have the phase 3 early base phase. So that would be when you're kind of starting to think, okay, it's time to get serious. It's time to, get a little more serious, definitely. The intensity is still moderate. If you do work with heart rate zones, that would be like zone 1, zone 2 workouts. Strength training may take a step up. You might have done a little bit in the aerobic reintroduction phase, but very light. Now it's time to, hey, I want to push this aspect a little bit and get ready for the seasons. This is a great time to put more strength training in your program. Still being patient, and also still focusing on flexibility. Your coach may give you sport-specific skills to use. ILT is isolated leg training. You may be working on eliminating the dead spot in your pedal stroke, or doing some spin-ups, working on your swim technique with drills. Perfect time in the early base period to do all these things. So how does that work in with our training and nutrition? Well, when you look at an entire season, if you've done, some reading about this, or if you do have a coach, you will see it's usually set up a certain way. And we call it periodization because there are certain periods where we want to work on different aspects before we attempt our key A race of the season. So first, we have the off season, which we're talking about today. Then we have base training, which is usually involves the lower heart rate training. It's just meant to set you up for a good year. We want to become very aerobically efficient. So that's what base training is. That can last anywhere from 10 to 14 weeks, depending on the athlete and what they need. Then we'll have some build training. This may be where you start to actually do some higher volume weeks, and then finally peak and taper. So that's right before your A race. The body actually has several different physiological systems or engines that you are fueling. So we may need different things throughout the year depending on which of these phases we are actually completing at the time. So, and keep in mind there are 3 types of fuel. There's fat, protein, and carbohydrates. These are the only fuels that give us actual energy through calories. When people talk about vitamins and minerals, there are no energy coming from those particular components. When people talk about water, there's no actual calories or energy coming from water. These are the three what we call macronutrients. So our goal is to match the amount and timing of these three fuel types to match the year, to coordinate with these phases that I've mentioned above. So our off-season nutrition, which is phase one. First of all, it's usually winter, and for those athletes that are in the northern part of climates here, we're starting to stay inside more. We're curled up beside the fire more. We really are usually just kind of hanging out, and it's easier to stay inside when it does, get to be this time of year, especially if you're up north. We have the holidays. That's a whole other aspect of off-season nutrition. Our training volume and intensity definitely decrease. So as we are burning less calories, because we are not training as much, we have to address our actual diet and nutrient intake. We're not putting in, or we shouldn't be putting in quite as much probably because of the fact that we aren't burning as much. But staying lean or an ideal body composition all year is not only difficult, but really it's seriously impossible sometimes. And it's not something that I would ask any of my athletes or even me personally to do. For our A race, we actually will be usually competing at a lower body fat in order to maximize our power to weight ratio, because we want to, be able to really power up those hills. We also don't want to be carrying extra weight up the hills on our bicycle, or, having, extra weight to carry on the IM marathon can really make a big difference. So we may have maximized our body composition during the year to be, lower than usual, but we don't want that all year round. So it is okay to gain some weight during this time. You also have to worry about injury propensity. If you tend to be on the low body weight side, and you're, especially if you're too low, you have to be careful. You definitely can increase your chances of injury, and that's not good. Nor do we want you to be yelling at everyone and just generally unhappy, which usually happens if you're kind of maintaining a lower body weight. So allow yourself a bit more leeway during this time. That's important too. So we want to look at your macronutrient distribution. And remember, macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. During phase one, so this is during the complete off-season, you may be doing nothing at this time. Slightly higher total fat and total calorie intake can be okay for 2 to 3 weeks. So this is not a license to go crazy for the entire time. This is really a 2 to 3 week period. 3 would really be on the upper end, and 2 or even 1 would be more likely for someone who wasn't at the very, very highest level of peak training for either an Ironman or half Ironman. So you really have to gauge that, and preferably we want that to be from, plant-based or non-processed fat sources. We don't want you to be thinking this means, yes, I have a license to go crazy. Moderate protein intake is important, and relatively low carbohydrate intake compared to your build and peak phases. So basically, we're taking the carbohydrates down because although they're our primary fuel for doing our long rides and our long runs, we're not doing that right now. So now would not be an appropriate time for us to have excessive carbohydrates, because we simply just don't need them. So if we're taking in excessive carbohydrates at that time, it just ends up being stored, and that's not really what we want. So a good ratio to think about is 40 to 50% carbohydrates, 20 to 30% protein, and 30% fat. And you'll see these ratios change as we go through from the different phases of off-season I was talking about. We're just in phase one. So this would be a good example of showing that protein is a little bit higher, carbohydrates go down a bit, and 30% approximately from fat. And just to show you, I decided to put myself, my own diet into there's a number of different sites you can use. TrainingPeaks has options for looking at macronutrient distribution. This is from FitDay. I just wanted to take a look at where I was during this off season and seeing in phase one what my diet looked like. And so you can actually break this down for yourself and put in what you're actually eating during the day and get a printout and an example of how this is playing out in your diet. So I said yikes, because my fat was a little bit too high. When I say a little bit, it was quite a bit too high. My carbs were low, and my protein was a little bit lower than I'd like to see it. So this is a perfect way to check these different areas. Where were my carbohydrates? Where is my fiber, which is an important an important component of carbohydrates as well. How many calories am I eating? Things like that are a really nice way to just do kind of a check. And you really should be doing that, not necessarily in this first off-season phase, but as you start getting closer to the base phase and the aerobic reintroduction, that's when it's a good time to really do this, to see how these match up to what it is we're talking about today. So a little bit more control during the year. So what should you gain? If you can gain a little bit, for most athletes, a reasonable upper bound weight gain from the previous season's leanest body weight, no greater than 10 pounds, but no less than 4 pounds. So if your leanest, you were around 125 pounds, you have some leeway. You know, I expect you to be right around 130, 135 during this time. That's okay. That would be on the upper end. So just keep that in mind as, you know, as you go through the season. You don't want to gain more than 10 pounds because it ensures excessive amounts of body fat are not gained. It would be very hard to lose this weight if you're going to go 15, 20 pounds. It's a little bit overboard, and it's very hard to lose. So you want to watch occasionally, get on the scale, go ahead and see where you are, and make sure that you're not going to sabotage your body composition goals for the next season by completely overdoing it. It also ensures that the athlete isn't going to injure themselves. You know, you can definitely injure yourself if you're taking, you know, more body weight out on the road with you, and you're going to be pounding out those miles in January. You really do want to not injure your bone or soft tissue. However, I also did want to say that it does provide an advantage, a slight advantage to us in injury prevention later in the season if we're carrying just slightly more now. So if I'm carrying just an extra 4 pounds or an extra 6 pounds now, as the season wears on and I do start getting towards my ideal, I'm actually helping my own body to resist injury a little bit more because it was used to carrying more early in the season. So that's why it can be a positive if you're just carrying slightly more early in the season, but as the season goes on, you are whittling that away. So we're into the aerobic reintroduction training phase, which would be phase 2. And I thought this was a good example of what you may think of. This gentleman sprained his wrist while inserting the exercise DVD. Hopefully you're going a little bit further with your aerobic reintroduction than this gentleman. So in your training, this may be a 2 to 4 week phase. And your duration is somewhere between, like I said, 30 minutes to 2 hours, so somewhere in there. The intensity is still fairly benign. It's fairly easy. So there should be no track workouts. There's no high-intensity intervals. Those kind of things are not part of long periods. You may be doing some very short things like that, but not necessarily long things. And strength training is very important as you start to get into the aerobic reintroduction. You should perform the sets in the repetition range designed for strength and muscular growth. So that's really key as we want to prevent injuries later in the season. So an example of that might be the 3 to 6 sets of 10 to 15 reps. And maybe you're weight training 2 times a week or 3 times a week. That's a perfect amount for just getting you set up for when you really want to increase your weights later in the season and in the early base phase especially. This is a perfect way to do that. Now, in speaking of the aerobic reintroduction on the nutrition side, this slide explains how most of us feel sometimes in January and things like that, where you just don't even want to inhale any secondhand carbs. You know, you're going to have to eat that donut outdoors. You know, people get kind of, I'm going to change. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to make things, you know, make a change, make things different. I get a lot of nutrition clients in January looking to make a change and do something from a little pretty opposite of what they've been doing in December. So on the nutrition side, it's time to take a realistic look of hours of training versus intake. So if you haven't been doing that in the first couple of phases, it's time to be doing it now. You want to look at your calories. You want to look at your carbohydrate intake and your fat intake. Do your calorie audit. You don't have to do this all the time. It's too labor intensive for people to be doing this all the time. I wouldn't ask my athletes to do this on a regular basis, but I certainly have them do it on, say, a quarterly basis or every couple of months, because it's a very good way to see if you are staying on track, or see a registered dietitian, or use the TrainingPeaks software. These are all great ways to see where am I falling. And I'll give you some general guidelines for calorie consumption where you may be later in the webinar. Your fat consumption should resume normal levels. So if you were kind of above in the first phase, because it was the 2 weeks of totally off training, you weren't doing anything at all, if you kind of went a little wild, and like me, and you went to 40% fat, it's time to bring it back down. It's time to bring it back down to 30, and the majority of your fat should really be coming from healthy sources. Lean protein. I can't stress this enough, and you're going to see this again and again in this webinar. Lean protein sources are so important, and they should be part of every single meal and every single snack. So spreading that protein out throughout the day is going to help control blood sugar, and it's going to make you feel fuller throughout the day. So it's extremely important to have some kind of protein source at each one of these things. And your carbohydrate intake should match the level of training. So this is a good example of how you can figure this out for yourself. If your volume, your training volume is 4 hours a week or less, this is a good guideline, 2.75 grams of carbs per pound of body weight per day. For example, if we have someone who is 150 pounds, then they are going to be right around 412.5 grams of carbohydrates per day. And this is not just carbohydrates from grains. You'll see later I'm talking about all kinds of carbohydrate sources, which include vegetables, fruits, also grains, of course, and whole grains. Also things like beans, legumes have a little bit of carbohydrates as well. So that's what I'm speaking about when I'm speaking of carbohydrate intake. And this is a great way to sort of gauge where you are and where you should be. So your early base phase training. This phase may be 2 to 4 weeks in nature again. Durations of workouts getting a little bit longer. You may be spending more time doing some long rides on your trainer at 2 hours and 3 hours, maybe even up to 4 hours. But the intensity still is not there. You're not doing intense workouts back to back. Usually you're not doing any extreme track workouts or anything crazy in terms of intervals on the bike. And our goal is to build the muscular endurance and aerobic capacity. That's what we're doing during early base phase. Strength training is usually a key component of this particular phase. If you weren't doing it before, you're usually doing it now. And the goal would be to develop strength and muscular coordination. So you may be doing things now that are a bit more compound, like low cadence work on the bike would be an example of triathlon-specific training that is also strength training. So that may be an example, and or you may be doing some hill workouts when you're running. That might be an example of some functional strength training that's happening during this phase. If you are using weights, you would be doing something like 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 10 repetitions, and you might be doing that 2 or 3 times a week. In terms of nutrition, we're going to be using our low intensity engine. So if you do have a coach or you're following a training program that uses heart rates, this part of your program would be involved with staying under a certain number for your bikes and your runs, below what we like to call the aerobic threshold. So we know we're using fat as the primary source for our fueling. And if we can allow our body to stay under a certain heart rate, we're going to be able to do that more easily, and we're going to teach the body to burn fat because we have the presence of oxygen to be able to do that. Due to less speed and force, so we're not doing, again, the hard activities back-to-back, the need for protein can still remain at moderate levels, less than it would during, say, your build phases or peak phases of the season. So here's how the ratio changes. 50% carbs, you can see that's up a little bit from the 40% we had earlier, 20 to 25% protein, and 20 to 30% fat. So fat can have a little bit lower range in that case. Protein, still moderate in the 20 to 25, but we do need a tad bit more in terms of carbs. So as you transition to these higher training levels, maybe you're only doing 4 hours before in, you're just aerobic reintroduction. Now you're doing early base days and you're up to 5 or 6 hours. You can go ahead and increase your carbohydrate intakes a bit, and that's where we get that 2.75 to 3.25. So our previous number was 412. Now we're going more like 412 to 487 for a 150-pound person. That gives you a little bit more of an idea of where you should be per day for carbohydrates. And again, if you're going up to 10 hours, that would be even a little bit more at 3.25 to 3.75 grams per pound per day. And the holidays. This is a slide I really like for the holidays because literally the holidays mean wonderful things to so many of us. Time spent with family, time spent with friends. It's a wonderful time of year, but it also can be a very scary time as we have holiday parties, we have shopping, everything is crowded, everyone is stressed out, and everyone is sort of having all these things on their desk, total cookies available everywhere. So you have to kind of have your wits about you as you get ready for this season. But one thing I'd like to say about the holidays, the best way to do it is really to reframe your view. So many of us go in by thinking, oh no, the holidays is going to be terrible. Instead of doing that, just take something that is seen as a bad problem or a scary time, and we shift it either in content or its context to be seen as useful rather than bad. So the whole goal is just to create a new perspective. This can lead to, like Molly Kellogg says here, an acceptance or creativity about what to do differently. So we just need to reframe our view, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that in a minute. Stress versus acceptance. So we can either stress about how it's going to be crazy because our parents are in town and this and that is happening, or we can just say, I know there's things I can't control about this season, and there's going to be challenges, but I can accept that I'm going to deal with those the best I can, and I'm going to take care of me. I'm going to make sure I'm sleeping enough. I'm going to make sure that I am still getting in some aerobic activity so that I'm able to be my best and make better decisions when the stress hits. So change your thought process. Here's one example. Tonight is going to be horrible. There will be all this bad food, and I'll probably eat all of it. 2, this is another example, I'm thankful to have access to this food. I will treat my body with love and kindness. So although that's a little hokey, I understand, but the goal is to say to yourself that you do have the ability to make different decisions. And instead of feeling out of control and stressing about things that may happen in an evening, instead saying, you know what, it's going to be just fine. I'm the one that really has the final say on how this is going to go. So really looking at it with a different attitude and a different perspective. And just another thing to keep in mind, too, with the sweets that are going to be around everywhere, the first few bites are actually the bites that activate our pleasure centers. So the very first few bites of that apple pie or whatever it might be, chocolate cake and whatnot, that actually activates that center. So once we keep eating, the high is actually already sort of passed. So we don't really need to keep eating and eating and eating. So the goal would be instead to take a smaller portion of something. Go ahead and have your cake. This time only comes around once a year. Have your favorite item, and maybe have it multiple times. But keep that portion a little bit smaller because you're not really doing much for yourself past that first 3 or 4 bite point. So it's not really necessary. Another idea too is to have a workout window. So develop that workout window. Let's say you're going to a holiday party at 7 o'clock, and so you do have some time available. It's a Saturday. Go ahead and work out at 4, and maybe you're riding your bike for a couple hours, so you're riding from 4 to 6. You're getting ready from 6 to 7. Allow yourself the 2 hours after the workout, so as long as the workout was, use that same time frame after the workout to go ahead and give yourself a little bit more leeway in terms of what you are eating because you are in a more metabolically active state. So your body is actually using more of that fuel coming in to use it for recovery and use it to restore your carbohydrate or glycogen levels, as we call it, in your liver. So more of those things are happening during that 1 to 2 hours, especially after, say, a 2-hour workout. So look at the ratio. If you did a 3-hour workout, you've got 3 hours after that to really go ahead and have some of those holiday items. Go ahead and go to the party and not worry quite as much because you're kind of in a metabolically active window right there. So that can help a little bit. So 5 holiday tips to help keep you on track. One is eat breakfast. And this is not just for the holidays. This is all the time. You really want to have breakfast, and you want to have it with protein. The goal here is to keep you full longer, and help you make better decisions as the day wears on. So when I say eat a breakfast with protein, something like this with an omelet would be a great example. Another example would be something like Greek yogurt that has protein as well, or oatmeal if you decide to add some nuts to it to give it some extra protein, like walnuts would be a great example. So have something with protein. Alternate drinks, and that does not just mean you're going to go from this martini to a vodka tonic or something like that. I'm not talking about alternating drinks between alcoholic drinks. I'm saying alternate drinks between the alcoholic beverages that are probably a little bit higher in calories and water. So just do one and then do the other type of drink so that you stay hydrated and you also get a chance to have your favorite drink. Fill that plate with veggies. This is a great way to be able to cut down on the total calories. For example, if you just have a fourth of cup serving, that's saving you 25 calories for one-fourth cup serving. So fill half your plate with vegetables, and that will help you cut down on some of the other things that are a little bit more calorie dense that you don't need to necessarily have extra of. So veggies, way to go. Start with a broth-based soup. So start with a soup that might be primarily have a chicken broth base or a beef broth base. That will help fill you up. It actually adds volume to your stomach that makes you feel full, and you end up eating less of the extremely calorie-dense items. So this is a perfect way to do it, and there's a great book on this called Volumetrics with Barbara Rolls. And have one less scoop of starches. That would be things like your mashed potatoes, your stuffing. Just watching your portion size on these can really save you a lot of calories. So still have the sweet potato casserole. Just try not to have 2 scoops. Maybe you just have 1 scoop, and you really savor that scoop, and it tastes great for you. So that would be a perfect way to save a little bit of calories. So these 5 holiday tips should help keep you a little bit more on track. How about weight loss during the off season? That's something that many of us are trying to do. And after we've sort of come through the first couple of phases and we realize that we've gone off the deep end, we've already done that a little bit, so we want to get back on board and lose some weight. This was a funny ad about, it's called the Viking diet, where we wear these Viking suits everywhere and feel so humiliated, we begin eating less and less. I love that. I don't know if that works. I would not advise trying that at home. What do we all want? Of course, we all want benefits of optimal fueling. We want improved strength, speed, stamina. We want to improve our power to weight ratio. We want to have more energy. We want to improve our blood and lipid and blood sugar and lipid profile, which is a great health benefit of doing all this exercise. We want to run faster, of course. We want to delay fatigue. We don't want GI distress when we're out there on our runs and definitely during races. We want to enhance our healing of injuries and illness. And we want to improve our performance. So, health is always number one in nutrition. But the wonderful thing is if we're doing the right things for our health and we're doing the right things for our body and we're also working out, we're taking good care of ourselves. And all of these things are possible through really making the most of our diet and putting the right things in terms of fuel. But let's face the facts here. I understand that losing weight is not easy. I talk to people every day who are working on this challenge. However, it certainly can be done. There are no magic bullets. I'd love to tell people that if they just took this or that, or they just did this or didn't eat after this time, they would be able to lose weight. But that's just not the case. The fact is that timing is important, and this is a perfect time because we are in a time where our training is usually decreased, and we can focus a little bit more because we, A, have more time, and we, B, aren't having to replace quite as much because we're not having to worry about the next day's workout being a 6-hour bike ride or even a 4-hour bike ride. We don't have to worry that our stores are low quite as much because those things aren't even happening. So this is a perfect time to go ahead and work on this side of things. So set a realistic weight loss goal. And it's really not even just about losing weight. It's about changing body composition. It's about losing body fat and retaining our muscle and or gaining muscle during this time. So a good goal is to lose about 1 pound of body weight per week. And this calorie deficit or shortage, a lot of people talk about 3,500 calories as equaling weight loss of 1 pound per week. And that's an interesting concept, and it's been around in terms of dietetics for a long time. Some people are debating that this is really true. For some certain athletes, I found that this less 500 calories over a 7-day-a-week period, which equals 3,500, works. And some people, we've had to up it. We've had to up it closer to 750 calories of deficit per day. So it really is very dependent on your physiology, your metabolism, if there's any hormonal things going on, how much sleep you're getting plays a huge role into this. More sleep equals more weight loss. So just keep that in mind. There's no set number here per person. It really is somewhere in this range per day equals 3,500 calories, approximately, maybe a little bit more, and that can equal approximate weight loss of 1 pound per week. So if you want to drop 5 pounds, plan on it taking about 5 weeks, which no one really wants to hear, but this is the sustainable weight loss. This is weight loss we can maintain over a long period. So as I said, the goal is to change body composition, but you are going to lose some muscle. That's just a fact. It doesn't matter who you are. Muscle is going to go along with fat, but the goal should be to retain as much as we can while we're losing that fat. How do we do it? We adjust the calorie intake like we talked about. We utilize metabolism increasing workouts, aka those lower heart rate workouts, zone 1, zone 2 workouts that are happening in the base phase to really use fat as fuel and to teach the body to use fat as fuel, because we really have an unlimited store of fat. 20,000 to 40,000 calories are stored of fat, within our body at any given time, no matter what your weight is. We only have about 2,000 stored carbohydrates at any one time. So that's why people say I hit the wall at mile 22 of the marathon, because they were out there around 2.5 or so hours, and that's about how long it took to burn those first 2,000 calories. So that's why we really want to watch our heart rate and make sure that we are using fat as our primary fuel source during this time. And engage in a program of resistance exercise. If we do that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create more muscle, and muscle is more metabolically active than fat. If you have more muscle, you're burning fat just sitting around more than the person next to you who does not have as much lean muscle mass. So does the frequency matter? Do we care when you're eating? Yes, we absolutely do, especially if you're having trouble controlling your blood sugar or energy levels. And really, that's most of us. Most of us have issues with this because of work, being busy, or things of that nature. So we don't want to go long periods of time without food. This can force our body into conservation mode and say to our body, okay, everything that comes in, you better store it because we don't know when food is coming next. So this is not the way to do it. It also means when we are eating, we are shooting insulin levels up very high and then coming back down, and they're staying very low. And when they're very low, we don't make good choices. This is when you're ruffling through your desk drawers or someone else's candy jar or things like that, because you're so hungry that you literally feel shaky and you don't feel like yourself. That's what's happening. Your blood sugar is entirely too low. So the goal is to really moderate that. 2 to 3 hours between meals and snacks is ideal. You really want to make sure that you're not spending a lot of time without some fuel coming into the system. And 3 meals plus 2 snacks is a great pattern for most people. So that works for a lot of the people that I work with on a nutrition basis. So what do our dietary needs depend on? Well, they depend on our age, obviously. Someone who's very young has a higher metabolism. They're going to burn more calories than someone who's a bit older. Male or female definitely makes a difference. Body size, so someone who weighs a bit more also needs more calories to support that weight rather than someone who weighs less. Physical demands of training. So again, as your training changes throughout the year, we have to address that. And then if you have any specific physiological conditions, something that may alter how much you need or what you need. So we need sufficient calories to fuel the body and to perform. So to do our workouts and feel good and have enough energy. And again, the only nutrients that provide calories are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Those are the building blocks of every single food that we eat. So how do we know? How do we estimate what I need versus what you need? This is a good way to do that. If you are a sedentary person, you are going to need a bit less, so you're getting a little bit less of an activity factor there with 25 versus someone who's very active and training for an Ironman might be 40. And again, kilograms or pounds divided by 2.2. So you will want to take your pounds, divide those by 2.2, and then take that times the factors here. And this is only an estimate. This is not necessarily exactly what you need, but it will give you a place to start. Nutrient timing, protein and fiber. I said we were going to talk about that again and again, and we are. This is so important to keep your blood sugar steady. Protein, fiber, and good fats, these have staying power. These are the things that really stick with us. They think of them as sticking to your bones and filling up your stomach and making you feel like something is really in there. It's not a quick flash and it's gone. We want to keep blood sugar levels from spiking too high, and protein, fiber, and some good fats have the ability to temper that rise in blood sugar that we would see if we just ate an entire bag of some sort of carbohydrate snack like pretzels or just chips by themselves or just crackers. Those type of items do not have a lot of protein, they do not have a lot of fiber, and they do send the blood sugar up very quickly, and insulin is released and it's very quickly taken back in the system. That's why you're hungry 20 to 25 minutes, maybe even 45 minutes after eating something like that. We want to make sure there's less fluctuation to help those who are trying to lose weight control your appetite. Again, not raiding the candy jar on the person's desk next to you. And protein induces hydrochloric acid production in the stomach, which actually, helps in terms of permitting full digestion. So we want that. This is something we absolutely want, and it's important because it really helps with our digestion as well. The satiety just means how full you feel. How satisfied are you? So protein has been reported to be more satisfying than both carbohydrate and fat. But this is a very important point. It should be limited to no more than 25 grams per meal. So I'm not telling you to go out and eat a 12-ounce steak, and that's exactly what you want to do because we love protein. This dietitian loves protein. No, that's not what I'm saying. The body can only adequately absorb about 25 grams at a time. You're really doing yourself a disservice because all of that extra protein in that 12-ounce steak really isn't doing you any good. It's going to be used as stored. It's not going to be used at all, really, by your body if you're just going to sit around with it and you've gone way over in terms of calories. So, each protein, carbohydrates, and fats all have a calorie level associated with them. And if you don't use it, guess what? It's stored. When many fibers enter the stomach, they actually mix with liquids. So they expand, and that makes you feel full. So a good rule of thumb, like I put in the corner, right-hand corner, is consume 4 fruits and 4 veggie servings per day. And this is not going to be easy, but it absolutely is going to make a difference for you in terms of how full you feel. And fiber moves slowly through the digestive tract. So that's exactly what we want. Also, we want you to be hydrated. That's going to help you lose weight and feel full. So the body is roughly 55 to 65% water. We absolutely need water for our brain, for the functioning processes that we have, not only just to make sure we're hydrated and doing our workouts well, but just so we feel better. And many people actually mistake hunger for thirst. So if you really truly think you're hungry, drink a 12-ounce glass of water, wait 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and then tell me if you're really hungry. If you're still hungry, absolutely, you need a snack. But if you're not, you may have just been thirsty. So keep in mind, all of these different things, caffeine, alcohol, stress, they induce dehydration. So you really can feel fatigued. You cannot feel like yourself if you're not staying hydrated. Keep a water bottle with the exact known amount on your desk. Know how many of those are a goal for you to drink per day. If it's, 64 ounces, make sure you get at least 64 ounces of that in. And that, keep track and set your watch if you have to. I have athletes and nutrition clients set their watch. By noon, they better have, 2 of those amounts gone, 2 of those water bottles gone. So make it a goal, set out with a goal in mind, and keep track during the day of how you're doing. My 3 biggest weight loss mistakes: skipping breakfast and or eating a small breakfast. You really got to make sure you eat, within 15, 20 minutes, half an hour at most from when you get up. It's so, so important to do that. We really need to give the brain energy to function. The brain literally will only run on carbohydrate portion, and your body needs other things like the protein, the fiber. So this is the perfect time to break that fast. You absolutely need to do it, and really it should be a fairly big meal for the day. Go ahead and, err on the side of a tiny bit more for breakfast, and you'll end up saving your calories towards the end of the day. Maybe you eat breakfast, but it's 100% carbohydrates. So you may be eating, a bowl of cereal that has very little fiber in it and is primarily carbohydrate-based, i.e. no protein. That bowl of cereal is gone within 25 minutes, 35 minutes, and you've got now until 2 or 3 hours where you're able to eat again. So do yourself a favor, make sure there's protein at breakfast. And then finally, focusing on quantity over quality. So focusing on, I'm just going to eat this huge plate of pasta that really just has, carbohydrates and not a ton of nutrient density. It doesn't have a ton of, when I say nutrient density, I mean vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, things that help our body to recover from exercise and provide the processes that we need. So ask yourself those tough questions. Will this support my blood sugar goals that I have? Is this variety? Am I getting fiber? Am I getting antioxidants? How long will this really keep me full? Why am I eating? Am I truly hungry? Is that the reason I'm eating, or am I just eating for some other reason that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I'm hungry? So focusing on quantity over quality. So what should you be eating? Whole foods high in nutrients. So when I say carbohydrates, this is what I mean. These are examples of carbohydrates. Kale, Swiss chard, collard greens. I've really been on a kale kick lately. Kale and baby spinach are two of my favorites, and there's so much you can do with them. People are making kale chips now in the oven as a snack because they're crunchy and they taste great. So that's one thing to look into. Baby spinach salad, I have it all the time for dinner along with my meal. So there's just so many options. Look for ways to include these. They've got this deep color of green, which means that it is going to have a lot of phytochemicals and a lot of nutrients. So these can provide more iron in your diet and some really great antioxidants, which we need as athletes to support all the oxidative stress that we actually make through exercising. Brightly colored vegetables, this is another great source of carbohydrates. So these things are perfect examples. They're very colorful. The tomatoes, the carrots, the Brussels sprouts, peppers, all great things that you can find around the perimeter of your grocery store. Take this time in the off season to try a new dish or a new item. Another way to do this too is through your snacks. Baby carrots, I'll usually have athletes make those in little baggies ahead of time on the weekends. Make all your baggies, make your servings that you need, and then go ahead every day, pull one of those out, and make sure that you do not come home with that serving. So that serving has to be eaten during the day. The more you do in preparation, the more you're going to find these things in your diet. So a lot of this is really about developing systems that allow you to eat these things more over time. What should you be eating? Brightly colored fruits, great source of carbohydrates. With the dark blueberries, strawberries, etc. I make smoothies all the time because it's just a great way to just put the frozen fruits in there and a little bit of Greek yogurt. I'll add orange juice, just a tiny bit, and some organic 1% milk. And it's an excellent way to just get a lot of nutrients in, a lot of fiber in right away. Definitely the whole fruits are going to give you more fiber than juice, and they're going to do it in such a way that makes you feel fuller if you actually eat things as a whole fruit versus, say, apple juice or orange juice. So I encourage people to just watch your juice serving size. And then optimal source, also whole grains. So quinoa is a great one for athletes. I have a couple recipes I love to give out that are with quinoa, wild rice, all these things. Protein, so important. I'd love all of you to be including fish in your diet on a regular basis, especially the fatty fish like salmon, things like that. Wild caught is always better if you can do it. Those are the fish that are out there eating the other things in nature that are good for us versus eating grains that we feed them. Beans are a wonderful, wonderful food, great source of protein, great source of fiber, just exceptional food. If you can include more beans in your diet, you're automatically going to see an improvement in your nutrition and the way you feel. Chicken and red meat for iron, which is also important for athletes. Healthy fats, the omega-3 fatty acids, extremely, extremely important for helping to reduce inflammation. You want to definitely include avocado, the nuts, the almond butters. People are really into those now. And olive oil and canola oil. Excellent things to cook with. So what should breakfast look like? This is a perfect example. Make ahead, muffin egg frittatas. If you type that into Google, you're going to come up with a recipe for these. And I have people make them ahead of time, put them in their freezer, take them down to the refrigerator when they're ready to have them. Take one out, microwave it, for just 20 seconds, and you've got a breakfast to go that already has a lot of vegetables included. You can put anything you want in there, peppers, onions, mushrooms, carrots, anything can go in those. So super easy to make. And a side of fruit, pack it ahead of time, cut it ahead of time, put it in these Tupperwares. And so just take things like this with you. So this would be a great example of what breakfast should look like based on having blood sugar control. What should lunch look like? We want to see big, colorful vegetables. We want to see a protein component like chicken, tuna, salmon, beans, legumes, things like that. And then maybe a side of a broth-based soup, fruit as a side, low-fat dairy as a side, either through low-fat milk or through Greek yogurt or something of that nature. This would be a great, great lunch to have. And vegetables, of course, like I said. And then finally, vegetables are a common theme for dinner, where, again, we want that fiber. So protein component can be 3 to 4 ounces. And you can add some grain-based carbohydrates, but it's going to depend on your time of year. Are you in the early base phase, or are you in peak phase, where you really need to replace a lot of those stores for the next day for a big bike ride or a long swim or a long run? So you're going to have to adapt the level of carbohydrates to the level of training per year. So the meal on the left may be more for early season when you just don't need as much because you're not doing as much. Hour-wise or intensity-wise, you're just not doing as much. So some great snacks. See how each of these are paired. So you'll see your orange, but again, we see nuts with it. So that's our protein component. So the fruit gives us fiber, the nuts give us protein. Again, the apple below it, paired with the nut butter, is a great way to add some protein to that meal, and it's absolutely delicious, these almond and butters and things like that. Hummus with red bell pepper, excellent, excellent snack. I eat it all the time. I love hummus, which is just ground up chickpeas. The hummus is your protein, and the red bell pepper or carrots are things like fiber, and they have great vitamin C. And finally, grapes and part skim string cheese, great fiber, and again, great protein. So these all of the excellent snacks. You've got to pack these things up ahead of time, have them ready to go, make your grocery list on the weekend, and make sure they're available. So in summary, don't let this happen to you. I want you all to enjoy the off season. It's a great time to take a mental break for those 2 weeks afterward, to really indulge in some things that you hadn't. But after that, it's time to get back to, good nutrition and really focusing on some things that you couldn't focus on when you didn't have time because you were just totally crazy during the season. So make sure you're using this time to try new recipes, make some of these changes, maybe adapt your body composition slightly, and, go ahead and be smart when you hit those holiday parties by using those tips I gave you. And I am definitely here and available for questions. This is my business name, Fuel Your Passion, and there's my contact information with my email. My website is fuelyourpassion.net, and I do have a blog that a lot of people read about. I write about my journeys as a professional triathlete and really whatever on my mind, and then also have a Twitter account as well. I'd love you to follow me. So thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone being here and listening, and I'll go ahead and take some questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kim. I have to say, of all the webinars we've done, this is probably the one that has given us the most questions. So I'd like to get a handful of the ones that people asked over and over again answered. So we might go just a little bit over 3 o'clock Mountain Time. So if anyone has to drop off, go ahead and do that. You'll be able to watch this recorded on YouTube. But I am probably going to let it go just a little bit past the hour mark. So with that being said, the first question that we saw a couple times was, what is the latest I should eat if I want to try and lose weight?
The latest that you should eat. This question, again, may vary based on what time of the year that it is. So, again, if you're in your, say, either the aerobic reintroduction or even the early base phase, and if you're not doing a lot of strength training, then you may want to keep that last meal to the 5, 6, 7 o'clock range. However, as soon as you're introducing more resistance training, and if you're trying to make sure that you do have not a long period of fasting, so if you are trying to lose weight and you want to make sure you're keeping that blood sugar stable, a great way to do that is to have your evening meal, let's say at the 5, 6, 30, 7 o'clock range, 7 at the latest, and then to go ahead and have something like a protein shake or something like that right before bed. So notice I didn't say, ice cream or cookies or, all that kind of stuff, the stuff that sometimes appeals to us when we're late and we might still be a little bit hungry. Give your body something it really wants, a protein shake that has between, say, protein at most, and that has around, say, 150 calories, 200 calories will be on the upper end. So the goal is not that we're adding tons of calories, but more that we're giving our body enough protein that we can rebuild through the night, and as the muscles rebuild, they have what they need to be able to do that. And we're reducing that fasting period between 9 p.m. when you're going to bed, like good little athletes, and 6 or 5 a.m. whenever you're up.
Okay, great. The next question is, what about inflammation? How important is it when trying to lose weight and because I'm an athlete?
Inflammation, I just can't stress this enough, is really our worst enemy as athletes. The more inflamed our muscles are and the more inflamed our veins and arteries are, the more they close down the ability for blood flow to come through. And that blood flow coming through is what actually takes the waste products out of the system and takes away that lactic acid that makes you sore and all those things. And so we want absolutely those veins and arteries to be as open as possible, and for our muscles to be, as not inflamed as possible when we start our next workout. So I just want to emphasize that if you're not eating fish on a regular basis, like you're not eating a fatty fish like salmon or something of that nature, I can't stress enough how important it is to be taking omega-3 fatty acids with around a gram. You're going to need 1 gram to 1.5 grams, even maybe upwards of 2 grams in total per day. So you do want to get a fatty acid supplement that when you look on the back, the 2 components, which are EPA and DHA, are in high enough amounts that you don't have to take 17 pills, that you're able to get to that gram level, 1 gram or 1,000 milligrams at least, and then up to even 2 grams per day. But I would check with your doctor just to make sure you don't have any other conditions that may not warrant you taking that. But I find that it helps with soreness, it helps with everything. I feel so much better if I'm taking that on a regular basis.
Okay, another one that a lot of people asked was the timing with early morning workouts. So let's say you get up and you have a swim session at 5 a.m. Should you eat before? Should you eat after? Where does breakfast fit into that whole arena?
That is a great question. That's one I get all the time. And if you are going to be up and swimming at 5:30, I know for a fact that athletes are not going to get up at 3:30 and cook a meal with an egg and all of this kind of stuff. So really, you're going to need something very quickly that can be digested, that doesn't have, well, this is kind of going against the protein and fiber that we would normally want you to have. Instead, we want something that gets into your system fairly quickly. So a good example might be a granola bar to have on the way to the pool, because you're probably going to get up with about, 5 minutes to spare. You're going to need something portable, and a granola bar or, something of that nature, Nutri-Grain bars. I mean, I don't like to name specific brands, but that's the type of item that I'd like to see, is something like that, something in the 150 to 2 calorie range. And yes, you absolutely should have something, because you've been fasting for a long time. That swim workout is going to require energy. You might be doing hard sets. So, and if it's going to be longer than an hour, you really do need to have a sports drink on deck. So if you're going 4,000 to 5,000 yards, there better be a sports drink as well sitting on deck that you can sip on in between as well to give you enough energy through that workout.
Great. So I have a couple of what I think will be quick questions for you to go through.
Okay.
The first one is alcohol a carb?
Yes, primarily the basis of alcohol is a carbohydrate. There's different calorie amounts, like I said, associated with each carbohydrate, protein, fat, and alcohol. And the carbohydrate and protein component is 4 calories per gram. Alcohol is 7 calories per gram, and fat is 9 calories per gram. So you can see that alcohol is somewhere in the middle in terms of calories, in between carbohydrates and protein, and then in between that and fat. But it absolutely is a carbohydrate, and it certainly does contribute to overall calories, and it also can contribute to dehydration if you decide to partake. So yeah, it is.
Okay, thanks. What is the best way to measure body fat?
This is a good question. There are a number of different ways. One way is using skin calipers, and I think it is a good idea to go see someone that does this. However, you definitely have to be trained. You can't. The person who's doing it needs to have a good handle on how to use them. If they're not using them correctly, and they're easy to not use correctly, it can be giving you false measurements. So skin calipers, someone trained, called never mind, doesn't matter what it's called. Anyways, so seeing someone, registered dietitians are sometimes trained in this type of use of skin calipers. Another way to do it is the bod pod. It's a giant egg-looking thing that a lot of research facilities will have. They have them on campuses of colleges and universities, and they're extremely accurate. They use your displacement of air to be able to, in this contained structure, so that once you're in, you displace a certain amount of air, and that's how they check it. But again, those are kind of hard to get to. To get into something that usually takes either a college or university connection or maybe a research study. So that's another way to do it. Those skin calipers are probably the easiest and most convenient way. Those scales that have body weight stuff on it are very subject to hydration status. So I would say they could be accurate within like 2 or 3%, but that's when you're dealing with body weight, 1% can even make a big difference. So that's my thought there.
Okay, thanks. And then I'm just going to ask one more question, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do with all these other questions that came in. But the last one for you is, what is your take on gluten-free diets?
This is a very good question, and I was just reading an article on this today. Basically, each individual, let me start here. Those individuals that have a particular genetic condition called celiac disease absolutely not only will benefit, but it's necessary to eat a gluten-free diet, because they do have a genetic portion of their body that demands that when they eat gluten, they see all these side effects. They see bloating, they see gas, and all these different just general GI distress type of things. For everyone else that doesn't have that particular genetic, I don't want to call it a defect, but that particular genetic profile, then it really is a choice. Some people may have a gluten sensitivity, and they may feel just by not eating gluten that they feel better. If someone is that type of person, then it's still a good idea to go get tested to see if you actually do have a gluten allergy or celiac disease. But for the general athlete population, gluten is a very, very prevalent thing, and it's in obviously many of our carbohydrate-based grains and things like that. And it can be difficult to meet your carbohydrate needs without gluten if you really are truly cutting it out. Many people cut it out just to be able to eat, say, I'm not eating it, and then they tend to eat more fruits and vegetables, and then they say, I feel better. Well, of course you feel better. You're finally eating the fruits and vegetables that you should have been eating when you had your regular diet. So, people are using that term, I went gluten-free, for all kinds of different reasons. And sometimes it's more just a change in what they're eating now that has allowed them to feel better. So for athletes, it's very individual. It's hard to eat gluten-free. It's very hard. if you are very stringent about it. And it can be difficult, like I said, to meet your carbohydrate needs, as I talked about, through the season or through the phases, especially at your peak phases when you're trying to restore a lot of muscle glycogen and, get ready for the next workout. So that's my general take on gluten-free.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kim. Well, it's been great having you do a webinar with us. We got a lot of really good information. We will be sending an email out to everyone who registered and everyone who attended with a link to the recorded webinar up on YouTube. And we also will send an email out with some additional information. And we've got some new webinars scheduled for January and going into February. So I highly recommend that you take a look at our webinar page on TrainingPeaks.com and see if there's any other ones that you guys would like to attend. So with that, Kim, I want to thank you and have a great day, everyone.